Hello everyone, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. So today we have come up with few important news articles from the Hindu newspaper. So we have covered those news articles in such a manner that they will be useful for prelims and mains examination. So before discussing those important news articles, let's try to solve yesterday's practice question. Remember, yesterday I have given you one practice question to solve. So the question was, consider the following statements about the great Indian bustard species. Please remember, we have been continuously discussing about the great Indian bustard. And this bird species is also in news because recently Supreme Court have made an intervention to protect the habitat of the great Indian bustard. Please also understand, the great Indian bustard population has been facing the threat of extinction because of the electrocution or the electric lines passing through the habitat of the great Indian bustard. So because of that reason, recently the Supreme Court has also directed the Union government to think over the idea of underground electric lines, so that the habitat of the great Indian bustard can be protected and their populations can be managed and maintained. So the question is, consider the following statements about the great Indian bustard. So the statements which are given here, the first statement says the great Indian bustard is an omnivorous species. Second statement, it is listed as a critically endangered species in the IUCN Red List. And third statement, its population is confined to mostly Eastern Ghats. Please understand, the great Indian bustard population is not confined to the Eastern Ghats. Rather, the population of the great Indian bustard is confined in the arid and semi-arid regions of Gujarat and Rajasthan. So therefore, the third statement is clearly incorrect. But on the other hand, the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, the great Indian bustard is listed as a critically endangered species. So therefore, statement 2 is correct. And great Indian bustard is an omnivorous species. So the correct answer for this question is option B, only 2. If we can talk about this solution for the question, recently Supreme Court has eased the ban on high power transmission lines within the habitat of critically endangered great Indian bustard, Rajasthan and Gujarat. So please understand, the arid and semi-arid regions of Rajasthan and Gujarat are the primary habitat of the great Indian bustard. So this decision of the Supreme Court comes after the formation of an expert committee, and this expert committee was tasked with balancing the conservation efforts and the development goals. So this is the main idea behind the balanced development, where the development should not degrade or destroy the existing environment and biodiversity. Rather, both should take place hand in hand. Okay, so the great Indian bustard is a critically endangered bird species. However, it has been increasingly facing the threat of extinction because increasing collision with these high power transmission lines. So therefore, this has prompted the conservation efforts from the government to manage the dwindling populations of the great Indian bustard populations. So today's practice question is, which of the following statements about azadirachtin is true? So the statements are, first statement, it is a synthetic pesticide and that is widely used in organic farming. This is the first statement. Second statement says it is derived from neem trees and acts as a natural insecticide. Second statement. The third statement, it is primarily used as a chemical fertilizer in agriculture. Fourth statement, it is known for effectiveness against the bacterial infections in plants. So please answer this question in the comment section and I will be providing you the correct answer tomorrow's lecture. So let's try to discuss few important editorials and also important news articles. The first very important editorial is with respect to the problem of left-wing extremism in India. or it is also called as Maoism in the tribal belts of India. Now in this image you can clearly see there are certain red corridors, or the areas which are highly infected by or affected by the left-wing extremism, and those regions are called as red corridors. And these red corridors are primarily located in the states of Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand, and southern Bihar, and parts of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and Maharashtra. These are the areas where these red corridors are located, where you can find a high intensity of Maoist activities or high intensity of left-wing extremism. So if you can look at this image, so these are the red corridors where there is a higher intensity or higher activity of the left-wing extremism. However, in India, number of LWE areas, police station wise, there are 762 left-wing extremism affected areas. Okay, so total number of areas. Now please understand few things with respect to the left-wing extremism. What are the major reasons for the growth of left-wing extremism, mostly in tribal belts of India? Mostly in the tribal belt of India. So the first and foremost reason was misgovernance in those tribal regions. Now apart from misgovernance, the police excesses and the human rights violations of the people in those tribal belts, where the Maoists very often enjoy the soft sympathy from the local tribes because of the police excesses and regular human right violations. And after that, there is an alienation of land rights for the people who are living in these tribal regions. So apart from alienation from their land rights, these tribal people are very often displaced, and adequate rehabilitation measures are not taken in case of any developmental project. So that is also one factor which has been contributing for the rise of left-wing extremism in these tribal belts. And the most important reason is infrastructure backwardness in these tribal belts, and at the same time mining activities that are taking place. So all these factors have been contributing to the rise in left-wing extremism in these tribal belts. So however, the effectiveness of the security forces to deal with the left-wing extremism in these tribal belts are limited by number of factors. Direct support of tribals to the Maoists is the one reason, and the second reason is difficult terrain where the surveillance would not be very easy for the security forces. And apart from that, the money laundering, or they also undertake cultivation of drugs or drug trade or drug businesses. So all these factors have been further increasing the left-wing extremism and reducing the effectiveness of the security forces. Now understand the context of this particular editorial. So in this editorial, the author has been talking about the conflict against Maoist insurgency that was prevalent since early 2000. Okay, so not after 2000, but the conflict against the Maoist insurgency was prevalent early 2000s, and it has evolved into a long-term challenge, but irregular clashes between the Maoists and the security forces. However, recently we have seen encounters between Maoists and the security forces, where there are also very often news of security forces killing Maoists or Maoists killing the security forces. So therefore, it has been creating a lot of challenges, the insurgency together creating a lot of challenges for maintaining law and order, to ensuring peace in those regions, and also making sure that those regions which are backward infrastructurally would be developed by the state intervention. Now in this context, we will understand what is LWE, what is left-wing extremism, What are the main challenges that the security forces have been facing in dealing with the left-wing extremism, and what should be the way forward? How can we proceed further with respect to the left-wing extremism? Does security related measures only solution, or along with the security related measures can we adopt any other approaches to deal with the left-wing extremism? So first and foremost, we must understand the insurgency dynamics in our country. So in recent times, the left-wing extremism has been receiving a less ideological influence of the new recruits, and at the same time the tribals are also not readily supporting the left-wing extremists. So there are a number of reasons, because nowadays the governments have been proactively involving in providing more and more services to the regions which are located in these tribal areas, or the regions which are affected by the left-wing extremism. So if I can give you one example, the government has come up with Ekalavya model residential schools. So these Ekalavya model residential schools would provide the best education for the tribal children. So therefore, there is a chance that the ideological influence of the Maoists on the tribal people has been gradually declining in India. So in fact, it is a good news because it ensures peace, and it also ensures law and order in those erstwhile red corridors of the country. And apart from that, even though the ideological influence of the left-wing extremism has been significantly declining, but it is said that the Maoists have largely retained their capacity to target the security forces, because we very often hear about the guerrilla attacks by the left-wing extremism or by the Maoists on security forces. So we should not undermine the capacity of the left-wing extremist forces and their effective attacks on the security forces. So therefore, it has been indicating their resilience despite facing a lot of setbacks, such as ideological setbacks in terms of regular encounters by the security forces. So we can say that the left-wing extremism or Maoists are more resilient and they are adaptable also. So that poses new challenges to us to deal with the left-wing extremism. And after that, what should be the military response and tactical shifts that were adopted by the Indian government to deal with the resilience and adaptability of the left-wing extremists? However, the security forces in recent times have adopted the unconventional military tactics and new combing routes to counter the Maoist attacks. Now, if I can tell you the unconventional military tactics that are being used by the security forces, recruitment of the tribals in security forces, because the tribals are very often well equipped with the local terrain. So these recruited tribals would help deal with the left-wing extremism in a much more effective manner compared to any other outside security forces. So this was one such unconventional military tactic that was followed by the security forces. And after that, tribal engagement and welfare measures are very important, because the majority of the support received by the left-wing extremists are from the tribals. Tribals, it is said that they are directly or indirectly supporting the left-wing extremists or Maoists. So therefore, the Indian state recognizes the importance of engaging with the tribal communities through welfare measures to counter the influence. So that means the government of India, along with the civilian administration and the security forces, regularly engaging with the tribals, providing them the welfare benefits or bringing them the welfare benefits, and along with those welfare benefits, developing infrastructure. So all these factors would lead to the mainstreaming of tribals and alienation of their support to the left-wing extremists, and at the same time addressing their grievances. So these are the focus areas of the government to deal with the left-wing extremism. However, there are certain challenges, and to deal with those challenges there are strategies also. So what are those challenges? Now if you look at Indian security forces which were dealing with the left wing extremism, or which have been dealing with the left wing extremism, so they have approached a combination of military as well as they have been adopted a dual strategy of military action against the Maoist cadres, and at the same time engaging with the civil society initiatives, right? So the dual strategy to deal with the left wing extremism actually involves: the first strategy, we will engage with the civilian society or civil society firstly, and secondly we adopt a number of security measures to combat the instances of the left wing extremism in those red corridors. However, when I say engaging with the civil society, so how we engage with them? So we provide them better infrastructure, education, healthcare access, and at the same time communication, connectivity. So all these factors plays a very important role whenever we are dealing with the civil society. So that creates a sense of trust and confidence among the tribal peoples about the government, that the governments have been doing good for the benefit of tribals. So therefore ultimately this will reduce the direct support of tribals to the left-wing extremists or Maoists. And secondly, we should also take into account the complex terrain and the tribal discontent as well. So if you look at these red corridors, most of these red corridors are located in a complex terrain. For example, I can tell you about the Dandakaranya. So this Dandakaranya is located in the tri-junction of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Odisha and Chhattisgarh. So this is one of the strong Maoist hold regions. So the challenging terrain and pockets of tribal discontent actually provide a fertile ground for the Maoist recruitment and further insurgency activities and disturbing the peace in those regions. However, there are efforts to address the underlying socio-economic grievances, because the tribals very often have certain grievances, and it essentially depends on how well we are addressing the grievances of tribals that will not generate the discontent among the people. So that is very important here. So because of that reason, the governments, both the center and the state governments, along with the civilian administration and security forces, constantly engage with the civil society in those regions. And at the same time, their reluctance to recognize the aspirations of the tribal communities. In fact, the left-wing extremist forces or Maoists are very often resistant or to recognize the aspirations of tribal communities for development and better governance, and that has been perpetuating a continuous cycle of violence. So earlier, the Maoists used to fight against the governments or fight against the capitalist class for the rights of the tribals, against the exploitation of the tribals. But however, now they are strongly resistant to recognize the aspirations of the tribal communities, the modern aspirations of the tribal communities. So they refuse to recognize these aspirations, and at the same time, this has been perpetuating the continuous cycle of violence in those red corridors. However, we must undertake certain measures to deal with the left-wing extremism. So when we talk about those measures, as I've already told you that there are certain governments which have started the rehabilitative program or rehabilitation programs for the surrendered Maoists. So such programs must be launched. And secondly, we must improve the infrastructure in those tribal belts. And we must address the grievances of the tribals so that it reduces their support to the Maoist cadres. And at the same time, we should also come up with modern equipment or modern weapons advanced weaponry such as drones to deal with the left-wing extremist forces or Maoists. So the next very important news article is with respect to the India-China conflict, and at the same time how a recent visit of External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar to Philippines actually showcases India's proactive stance on the South China Sea. Now understand the context of this particular editorial. India's stance on the South China Sea has undergone a significant evolution that has been reflecting the broader strategic and economic aspirations on the global stage. Okay, so India's recent stance on South China Sea has been reflecting India's broader strategic and economic aspirations on the global stage. And this has been taken place especially in the backdrop of rising tensions between Manila and Beijing. So Manila was the capital of Philippines and Beijing was China. So with respect to the South China Sea issue, there were increasing tensions between Philippines and China. So recently, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar had a visit to Manila on March 2024, and this has been signaling a departure from the previous cautious approach that was followed by India. Now India has been adopting a more proactive policy with respect to the South China Sea. Now why there is a clear evolution from earlier cautious policy or cautious approach to more proactive policy, we will understand this briefly. So when NDA government, National Democratic Alliance government, came to power in the year 2014, so this government has expressed its strong desire and commitment to engage with the all Southeast Asian and East Asian countries. So earlier governments have followed a policy called Look East. They have followed a policy called Look East. So Look East policy of India defines India's engagement with all East Asian and Southeast Asian countries, particularly the Asian countries. However, when NDA government came to power in the year 2014, the Look East policy was changed into the Act East policy. So the Act East policy was more a proactive policy compared to the Look East policy of the previous governments. So the Act East policy essentially looks at Southeast Asia, our major region, to further enhance India's influence, further increase India's regional leadership role. So initially, India's engagement with South China Sea was primarily under the Look East policy, and it has primarily focused on economic integration and securing the energy resources for India. However, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, when NDA government came to power in 2014, India transitioned to the Act East policy, and this Act East policy has been emphasizing on the strategic element. So earlier there was no such strategic element involved in the Look East policy, but now in the Act East policy there is a mention of the strategic element, where India will have a strategic partnerships with all the Southeast Asian or major Southeast Asian countries, and there will be expanded or increased security cooperation with the countries in the Indo-Pacific region, because it is believed that in the Indo-Pacific region India has the central role. Okay, so because of that reason India has made a transition from the Look East policy to the Act East policy. Now, in order to pursue its strategic objectives, India had a lot of strategic partnerships and security cooperation also with all of these Southeast Asian countries. The Act East policy has been emphasizing on not only the economic integration, so it not just looks after the economic integration, but rather it also looks after the strategic partnerships and expanded security cooperation with countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore and Philippines. Okay, so this is the essence of the Act East policy of the government, because Along with the economic integration, it is also looking for the strategic partnerships with major countries in the Southeast Asia. And after that, recently, increased aggression and assertiveness of China in the South China Sea. So see the highlighted region that you can see here, this region is known as the South China Sea. Okay, so recently there was an increased assertiveness and aggression of China in the South China Sea. However, it has been a concern for all of these countries such as Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia and Indonesia because of increased assertiveness and aggressiveness of the China. However, India's engagement actually reflects the support for the principle of freedom of exploration and exploitation of the maritime resources within the bounds or within the framework of international law, particularly the United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. So this actually signifies India's commitment to the rules-based international maritime order. So India is committed to this particular rules-based international order. So however, India has constantly maintaining a complex relationship with China. So there are a number of reasons for that, why India has been maintaining a complex relation with China. So first and foremost, we always have the historical border disputes with China. So recently it was in news that China has been renaming certain places in the Arunachal Pradesh. And we have Galwan clashes in the year 2020. And apart from that, we also have the Doklam clashes in the year 2017. And Chinese also have claims over this Ladakh region, Aksai Chin region. So we can say that there were historical border disputes between India and China, and that has been intensified by the recent instances of the Galwan Valley 2020. And these instances or incidents have been indicating Chinese assertive posture and periodic incursions into the Indian territory to contribute to the regional tensions. And apart from that, now India's response to the Chinese aggression. So aggression not just on the Indian borders, but aggression in the South China Sea. So what was the India's response? So India's response includes sending a frontline warships into the South China Sea and demonstrating India's capability and commitment to the regional security. Now India has been asserting itself as a regional power, and that is a very important change that we have been observing in India's Indo-Pacific policy, because China is very well known for adopting the aggressive and assertive postures against India and other regional neighbors. So therefore, India demonstrating its capability is something which has been indicating a changed approach from the Indian side. So counter to Chinese assertiveness. So how India has been countering Chinese assertiveness? Through the strategic engagements that include naval exercises with these countries in the Southeast Asia, military cooperation, and they actually serve as a counter to China's lawful assertions in the South China Sea alongside the Indian border. So all these factors have been further complicating the relation between India and China, and at the same time this has also been the major driving factor for India to further increase its presence in the South China Sea. So now we will have to understand the ASEAN factors also. ASEAN actually means the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Now what is the role of ASEAN countries in the South China Sea? How ASEAN countries can actually help India to pursue its policy as a regional leader. So India actually recognizes the critical importance of the South China Sea for regional security and at the same time the maritime order. So for the maritime order and the regional security, South China Sea is very important, and India rightly recognized the role of the South China Sea. However, the disputes in the South China Sea region actually impact India's trade and energy transportation routes. Okay, so that significantly impacts India's supply chain resilience India's trade with other like-minded nations. So therefore, India well understood the regional security implications by the assertiveness and aggression of China in the South China Sea. However, we can consider India as one of the responsible stakeholder. It is committed to the enforcement of international law, rule of law and order. So it is a responsible stakeholder in the Indo-Pacific, and India very often advocates the rules-based international maritime order emphasized by the UN Convention on Law of Seas. However, there are certain challenges and imperatives also. So the challenges include, while advocating for a rules-based order, India has been facing a number of challenges and differences within the Asian region, because all Asian countries do not have the common opposition to China with respect to its aggression and assertiveness in the South China Sea. Okay, so there were a divergent stance and divergent interests among the countries in the South China Sea, in the Asian grouping. So that is a concern. However, India had adopted a nuanced approach, and that this particular approach aims to safeguard its interests while contributing to the maintaining of peace, stability and respecting international law in the Indo-Pacific region. However, this is a clear policy stance from India to engage more proactively in the South China Sea to contain the assertiveness and aggressiveness of the China and maintaining peace, stability and international order in the region. So next, a very important news article is with respect to the National Curriculum Framework for Early Childhood. Okay, so understand the context. The context is that the news article, activity-based curriculum drawn up for Anganwadis. So in every country, early childhood care and education is very, very important. So why? Because those 3 years of a child would determine his or her future learning outcomes. And because of that reason, the early childhood care and education in any country has given a lot of importance, especially in a country like India, where we have a poor standards of early childhood care and education. However, also understand, in providing the services of early childhood care and education, Anganwadis very often play most important and most instrumental role. So they have a most prominent role in imparting the early childhood care and education. So for this particular reason, there was a National Framework for Early Childhood Simulation 2024 was recently launched, and this has the activity-based curriculum. Now we will understand shortly what exactly is the activity-based curriculum. And this National Framework for Early Childhood Simulation 2024 underscores critical role of the early learning in shaping the child's development. Okay, so it emphasizes on the role of early childhood care, the activity-based curriculum, in shaping the child's development in his or her early ages. Now, with a focus on children from birth to the age of 0 to 3, so is the focus age group of children. And this particular national framework has actually emphasized on importance of age-appropriate activities. For example, if a child is 2 years old, then there would be a certain age appropriate activity. If the child is 3 years, then there will be a separate age appropriate activity. So those age appropriate activities are conducted by parents, Anganwadi staff, Asha workers, and that could lay a strong foundation for the future learning of these children, and that could also significantly improves the learning outcomes of the children. Now, fostering continuous learning through this national framework on early childhood care and education. So this has been emphasized on a new method of curriculum, that is Navachetna curriculum. So this Navachetna curriculum is actually aligned with the National Education Policy 2020. We all knew that the National Education Policy was launched in the year 2020. And this Navachetna curriculum is aligned with the National Education Policy. Now, what exactly is the Navachetana method of curriculum? So this introduces, or this Navachetana method of curriculum emphasizes on the activity based curriculum. There would be certain activities which are being given to the children. It emphasizes on activity based curriculum of children, and that ultimately helps in continuous learning from the infant stage to the toddlerhood. Right from 0 to 3 years, active learning of children would be promoted through this activity based learning, that is Navachetana curriculum. And secondly, it also emphasizes on staff training initiatives, because now different activity based curriculum is introduced. So that's fine, but now parents, asha workers and anganwadis would play a major role in imparting or further enhancing this activity based curriculum, because they were the key players at the grassroots level, and they were the ones who regularly use those activity based methods to impart new new things and new knowledge among the children. So therefore, training programs are being organized for staff in 14 lakh Anganwadi facilities. So for the effective implementation of this particular Navchetana curriculum. And at the same time, it will also equip the frontline workers with necessary skills and the knowledge. However, it focuses on the multifaceted engagement. So there are different stakeholders, and we must recognize those different stakeholders who are involved in this actual process. So this curriculum rightly emphasizes on diverse activities. So those diverse activities consisting of talking, playing, sensory stimulation, promoting holistic development across various domains are the key areas. So these are the key areas where this particular curriculum is being emphasizes on. And what will be the key components of the curriculum? So the first key component was simulation of senses. We must recognize the importance of sensory experiences in the early learning stage. So that is very important. So because of that reason, and this curriculum consists of a stimulation of senses as a method. So this particular method engages children in sight, touch, sound and movement. Remember, this facilitates the holistic and all-round development of children, and that would further improve their learning outcomes. Apart from that, there is also a focus on the brain development of the children. So according to the reports, they are suggesting that 75% of the brain development in children actually takes place in the first 3 years. And at the same time, this early childhood care and education also emphasizes on 0 to 3 years. Keeping this in mind, this curriculum actually provides a detailed instructions to optimize the cognitive growth of every children who are part of these centers. And after that, the language and the literacy promotion activities would also be undertaken to further impart the literacy and language skills among or knowledge among these children. Okay, so this can be done through the age appropriate activities. And the curriculum also aims to foster early language acquisition, emerging literacy, numeracy skills critical for the future academic success of children. Okay, so however, there are certain progressive activities which will be taken up. Okay, so those activities include the developmental milestones. Okay, because the curriculum actually delineates 36 sets of different activities, and those activities are actually aligned with the developmental milestones of the children. And there will be a personalized interventions, so that all these activities, the age appropriate activities, would be performed by the children, and they acquire adequate skill and adequate knowledge, and the cognitive growth of children would also be achieved. So in order to do that, there will be a personalized interventions on children. Okay, so in case of any developmental delays on any children or in any children, So this particular framework actually empowers the caregivers such as ashas, anganwadis and parents to adopt certain activities and interventions, and those interventions are specifically suited for individual children needs, and that could ensure inclusive learning environment for the children. And apart from that, we must empower the caregivers also. So empowering caregivers by providing step-by-step guidance, the curriculum empowers the caregivers to facilitate a meaningful interactions and learning experience. They are conducive to the children's holistic development. So ultimately, in the age group of 0 to 3 years, it will ensure the conducive development of the children, the holistic development of the children, and it also improve their learning abilities, their cognitive abilities, and ultimately it impacts their learning outcomes in the future. So in order to make the early childhood care and education more holistic, this new curriculum is being introduced at the national level. So the next very important news article, so this is indigenously built cruise missile successfully tested by the Defense Research and Development Organization. Okay, so the context is DRDO successfully test fires indigenous long-range subsonic cruise missile. So this missile is also known as nearby missile. So we will understand what exactly is this nearby missile. So nearby actually means fearless. So the meaning of nearby in Sanskrit is fearless, and this nearby missile that you can see on this image is actually a long range all-weather subsonic cruise missile. So there are certain missiles: subsonic missile, supersonic missile, hypersonic missile. Okay, so each one of them the advanced version of the other. So the advanced version of subsonic missile is supersonic missile. The advanced version of supersonic missile is hypersonic missile. So India still not possessed the hypersonic missile. Okay, so this subsonic nearby missile can be launched from multiple platforms. Multiple platforms in the sense that from any vehicle, it can be launched from land, air, and also from the water. And it also capable of carrying the conventional nuclear warheads. However, the nearby is powered by the solid rocket booster, and the other characteristic feature is that it is also known as the indigenous technology cruise missile, because the nearby missile has used the indigenous technology cruise missile, and it is actually equipped with indigenous propulsion system and Manik turbofan engine. So these are the characteristics of the indigenous technology cruise missile. So the other major characteristic of nearby missile is it is claimed to have a sea skimming and loitering capability. Now here, sea skimming capability of a missile actually means that it can escape the infrared and the radars, the enemy radars and the infrared rays of the enemies, so that it can carry out the targets with higher precision. And loitering capability actually means that it can trace, track, and can hit the targets with high precision and high accuracy. So therefore, nearby missile belong to both sea skimming and loitering capability. Now we'll understand what exactly is the cruise missile. What is the meaning of a cruise missile? Now cruise missile is actually an unmanned self-propelled, so it propel itself. Okay, so this is unmanned and self-propelled till the time of impact, and it guide the vehicle towards the target. And it also sustains the flight through the aerodynamic lift, and most of its flight path whose primary mission is to place an ordnance or a special payload in the target or on a target. So they fly within the Earth's atmosphere, but on the other hand, with respect to the ballistic missile, that was not the case. They fly out of the Earth's atmosphere and then uses the gravitational force to hit the targets on the ground. Okay, so but cruise missiles fly within the Earth's atmosphere and use jet engine technology. So these vehicles vary greatly. The cruise missiles vary greatly based on their speeds, their ability to penetrate into the enemy defenses. Cruise missiles can be categorized by size, their speed, whether they can be subsonic or supersonic range, and whether launched from land, air, surface, ship or submarine. So this is the supersonic missiles or cruise missiles. Okay. Next important news article. Recently, a survey conducted by a Switzerland-based NGO has revealed that Nestle, a food manufacturing company, Nestle baby food sold in India has the higher sugar content. So Nestle has been using higher sugar content in the food manufactured for the consumption of children. However, it is said that the higher consumption of sugar, the artificial sugar or added sugar in baby foods, would harm the health of the young babies. However, the concern is that the Nestle was following the strict regulations in all Western countries, but on the other hand, Nestle has been floating norms in Southeast Asian countries such as Thailand, Indonesia and India and a few African countries. So that is particularly concerning here. So according to the findings by Swiss-based non-governmental organization, so that was Public Eye and International Baby Food Action Network. So according to their findings, Nestle sold baby products with a higher sugar content than less developed South Asian countries. So they include India, Africa, Latin American nations compared to the European markets. Okay, so that is the concern, and that is what the findings of an NGO reveals about the Nestle food products. So according to the report findings, Nestle had alleged to add around 2.7 gram of sugar per serving of Nestle Cerelac baby cereals which are sold in India, while refraining from such practices in other countries such as Germany, Switzerland, France and UK. So this is particularly concerning. Okay, so this is what the reports have been suggesting. So global report highlighted sugar content disparities in Nestle's baby products. So disparities because it is refrained from using such higher amount of artificial sugars in developed countries, in the Western countries. But on the other hand, it has been floating norms with respect to the added sugars in Southeast Asian countries. So higher sugar levels are found in South Asian, African and Latin American markets, including Indian market. However, World Health Organization had actually cautioned against introducing added sugars before the age of 2. Before the age of 2, we should not introduce the added sugar because that could significantly impact the health of the children. So the Cerelac's sugar level vary by market, and Nestle India asserts its compliance with the Codex standards. Okay, so Codex actually provides standards for the manufacturing of food and its quality to prevent the adulteration of the food. However, in response to these findings, Nestle India claims that it reduced baby product sugar by up to 30% in last 5 years. So in response to this particular findings, Nestle India stock dropped by up to 5.4% post this controversy. Okay, so the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, FSSAI, it is a statutory body under the administrative control of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Now, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India will investigate this issue of using higher amount of added sugars in the baby foods by the Nestle. And apart from that, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights had also taken note of this report and issued notice to the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India to conduct a comprehensive investigation on Nestle. So, Nestle has said that in order to ensure that their products are manufactured in India which are full of and strict compliance with the Codex standards. Codex is a commission established by World Health Organization and Food and Agriculture Organization, and they are also meeting the local specification as required by the local governments. Okay, so this was what the response from the Nestle with respect to these allegations. Okay, so that's all in today's lecture, and thank you so much. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.